Looking back to my days of playing football, my teammates and I won a championship in high school, college, and the pros. He took a raw talent and a raw toughness in me, and he refined it into a mental discipline. A discipline that is necessary to excel. A proud and hard-working people that love their football and their players.
Someone once asked me to name the 5 football players I admired most. At 74, I have learned that admiration is a harder word than greatness. Greatness can be measured in championships, honors, and seasons people still talk about. Admiration is quieter. It begins with what a man does when no camera's waiting for him. People remember the way I played. They remember the stare, the noise, and the anger. What they could not see were the men I watched when I was still learning what it meant to belong in Pittsburgh. One taught me how to lead without raising his voice. One gave me the confidence to face forward and never look back. Another met me every morning in practice and refused to give an inch. One made football seem slower because his mind arrived before the ball. And one man became the standard for all of us. This is not a ranking of fame. It is a debt of memory. And before I understood the standard, I had to learn from a captain. Number 5, Andy Russell. When I got to Pittsburgh in 1974, Andy Russell was already the captain. I was the rookie. That was the whole arrangement, really. He knew what Sundays felt like. I knew how badly I wanted to get on the field. I didn't walk into that locker room looking for a mentor. I wasn't that thoughtful then. I was trying to make the team. I was trying not to look lost. So I watched people, and Andy was one of the men you watched. He wasn't putting on a show. That's what I remember. He came in prepared. He knew his assignment. If something went wrong, he didn't spend 5 minutes explaining why it wasn't his fault. He moved on. The next play mattered. With Andy, it always seemed that simple. Now I was different. I played hot. Sometimes too hot. I thought intensity could solve just about anything. Andy never sat me down and tried to take that out of me. At least that's not how I remember it. He let me be who I was. But standing beside him made me notice something I hadn't understood yet. A man can play with fire and still be steady. The men around him have to know which version of him is going to show up. That next year, Andy, Jack, Ham, and I were all selected to the Pro Bowl. People like to mention that because it sounds good. And it was good. But when I think about the 3 of us, I don't think first about Hawaii or the recognition. I think about lining up. I think about looking over and seeing Andy where he was supposed to be. Again, you stop worrying about a man after enough moments like that. You just trust him. I probably didn't appreciate that fully when I was young. Young players notice the big hit. They notice the crowd. They notice who gets his name in the paper. Reliability takes longer to understand. You have to lose a few games. You have to make a few mistakes. Then you begin to see the value of the man who doesn't change when things get ugly. Andy had already lived through the years when Pittsburgh wasn't winning much. He stayed. Then the team changed, and he was still there. Same man, same preparation. That meant something to me, though I doubt I said it at the time. That's the honest part. Admiration doesn't always arrive while you're standing next to somebody. Sometimes it comes years later when you remember the small things and finally understand what they were teaching you. Andy taught me that leadership wasn't about being the loudest man in the room. It was about being the man everybody could count on. And after Andy, I learned there was another kind of trust, the kind you feel when Mel Blount is playing behind you and you know you can keep your eyes forward. Number 4, Mel Blount. Mel was different from Andy. Andy taught me what steadiness looked like when it stood beside you. Mel gave me something else. He gave me the freedom to stop thinking about what was behind me. That sounds simple now. It wasn't. At middle linebacker, your eyes are everywhere. The backfield, the tight end, a guard coming off the line. You try to read it all before it moves. And somewhere behind you, Mel Blount was doing his job. I don't remember us having many long conversations about trust. Maybe we did here and there, but that is not what stayed with me. I remember lining up, seeing a receiver split outside and noticing Mel already there. Close. Calm. Ready. There was no reason to ask if he had him. The ball was about to be snapped. We both had work to do. Mel is a big man and people remember the physical part of his game. They should. But size alone was never the thing I admired most. It was the control. Mel could play hard without becoming careless. He understood where he could take a chance and where he could not. That mattered to all of us, especially to me. I played forward. That was how I was built. I wanted to get to the ball before the play had time to become comfortable. If I had spent every second wondering whether the outside was covered, I would have been a different player. With Mel, I didn't have to be. Now, that doesn't mean he never got beaten. I never played with a man who won every snap, and I don't trust memories that pretend otherwise. We made mistakes. We gave up plays. We walked back to the huddle angry with ourselves. But the next time Mel lined up, he looked like Mel again. That is harder than people think. We won 4 Super Bowls together. Years later, those are the things everyone wants to talk about. The rings. The names people gave our defense. Winning stays in the record book, but trust doesn't. Trust lives in those few seconds before the snap when you look at the man beside you or behind you and decide whether you can do your own job without trying to do his too. With Mel, the answer was yes. I probably never said that to him. We were not a group that stopped every week to explain what we meant to one another. We played. We expected each other to be ready. Sometimes that was the whole conversation. The greatest compliment I can give Mel is that most of the time, I kept my eyes forward. And when I think about the man who forced me to look straight ahead during practice day after day, I think of Mike Webster. Trust with Mel came from knowing he had my back. Respect for Mike began when neither one of us was willing to give the other an inch. Number 3, Mike Webster. Mike Webster and I came to Pittsburgh in the same draft class in 1974. People look back at that class now and talk about history. We did not know anything about history then. We were rookies. We were trying to stay. That was it. Mike was an offensive lineman and I was a linebacker, so sooner or later we had to meet in practice. We met often. Twice a day as I remember it. The whistle would blow, the ball would move, and there he was again. Mike. I can still see the top of his helmet across from me. I knew what was coming. He knew what I wanted to do. Neither of us was interested in making the other man's afternoon easier. There was no speech between us. No agreement about making each other better. People add that meaning years later. At the time, I wanted through him, and he wanted to keep me out. And he could move you. What I remember most, though, was not one collision. It was that he kept coming back. Morning practice ended. We ate, rested a little, taped up whatever was hurting, and went out again. Mike was still there. Same stance, same effort, no complaint that I heard. I was stubborn. I know that. Back then, I probably thought stubbornness belonged to me. Mike corrected that idea pretty quickly. We were both fighting for a place, and neither of us could afford a soft day. If I eased up, he would expose it. If he eased up, I would try to run through it. I do not remember thanking him. I doubt he thanked me. We were young men trying to survive camp. Gratitude came later. That is the part people miss when they talk about those Steelers teams. They see the championships and assume we somehow arrived fully formed. We did not. Before the rings, there were hot practices, tired legs, bad tempers, and another man across from you who refused to let you pretend you had done enough. Mike became one of the great centers in the history of the game. But when I think of him, I do not first see a trophy or a photograph. I see a rookie getting back into his stance. Again, then again. You learn something about a man that way. He never asked me to respect him. He made it impossible not to. Not because he talked like a tough man, but because the next time I came at him, he was ready. Every time. I wish I had understood then how rare that was. Maybe we assumed the strongest men would always be there. Years pass and you realize how much of your toughness was shaped by the man across from you. Mike tested my body every day. The next man on this list tested something else. Jack Ham made me slow down, look closer, and understand that a linebacker could win the play before the hitting ever started. Number 2, Jack Ham. Mike Webster made me fight my way through a play. Jack Ham made me stop and see the play first. Jack and I were not alike. Not really. I played with a lot of emotion, sometimes anger. I wanted to get to the football before the man carrying it had time to think. Jack was calmer. He watched. He waited. And somehow he always seemed to know where the ball was going. That used to bother me a little. I would be studying the formation, trying to read the backs and the guards, and Jack already looked comfortable, not relaxed. There is a difference. He was ready. He had seen something. After enough years beside him, I learned to notice that there were moments in the huddle when I would look at Jack's face and know he understood what the offense was trying to do. We did not need to hold a meeting about it. There was no time anyway. The crowd was loud. The offense was waiting. We had only a few seconds. Sometimes a glance was enough. Then the ball moved and Jack would be exactly where the play needed him to be. How do you explain that? People call it instinct. Maybe some of it was, but I saw the work behind it. Jack studied the game. He understood distance movement and the little habits players reveal without knowing it. A lineman leaning differently. A back standing a little too deep. Things most people never noticed. Jack noticed. I probably relied on that more than I admitted at the time. When you are young, you like to believe every good play begins with your own eyes and ends with your own effort. Years later, you become more honest about how much the men beside you are doing for you. Jack allowed me to play fast because he helped make the picture clear. He was not perfect. None of us were. But he rarely looked hurried. Even when something went wrong, he did not carry the mistake into the next play. I admired that because I was not always built that way. I could hold on to things. A missed tackle. A bad call. Jack seemed able to put it down and keep playing. We spent years beside each other. Long enough to know when the other man was tired. Long enough to recognize frustration without asking about it. Long enough that silence became its own kind of communication. Jack later said generous things about me as a linebacker. I appreciated them. I still do. But the truth is, playing beside him made me better than I would have been alone. He taught me that intelligence was not the opposite of toughness. It was part of toughness. Jack helped me understand the game. But there was one man who helped me understand the Steelers. When Joe Greene walked into a room, nobody needed to explain who had set the standard. Number one, Joe Greene. Jack Ham helped me understand the game. Joe Greene helped me understand where I had landed. When I arrived in Pittsburgh in 1974, Joe was already Joe. I mean the way men around him responded. A room did not suddenly become silent because he demanded it. It changed because everyone knew his standard and nobody wanted to be the man who fell below it. I noticed that as a rookie, you notice everything when you are trying to make a team. Who practices when he is tired? Who looks away after a mistake? Who needs to be praised? Joe never seemed interested in any of that. He came to work and his work told you what was acceptable. I cannot remember one grand conversation where he explained Pittsburgh to me. Maybe that is because there was not one. Joe did not pull me aside and hand me a list of rules. I watched him practice. I watched him react when our defense gave up a play. I watched him take responsibility without making a show of it. That stayed with me. I was intense, and people sometimes mistook intensity for leadership. They are not the same thing. A man can shout and still leave others uncertain. Joe could say very little and make every man around him understand that the next snap mattered. And if Joe was hurting, he worked. If he was angry, he worked. If we won, he came back and worked again. It sounds ordinary when you say it that way. But dynasties are built from ordinary things repeated by men who refuse to lower the standard. We won 4 Super Bowls together. People see the photographs and imagine we knew what we were becoming. We did not. We were just trying to be ready for Sunday. But when things got difficult, you looked at Joe and knew excuses were finished. I admired Andy Russell's leadership. I trusted Mel Blount behind me. Mike Webster taught me what it meant to keep coming back. Jack Ham showed me how much of football happens before the collision. Joe carried all of that. That is why he is number one. Not because he asked to be. Not because he needed the title. He was the standard before any of us had the words for it. I probably never told him that plainly. Men from those teams were not always good at saying what another man meant to them. We expected him to be Joe Greene, as if that cost him nothing. Age makes you less comfortable with that kind of silence. So I will say it now. Joe never told me what a Pittsburgh Steeler was supposed to be. He stood in front of me and showed me. Everything about the list leads back to that. Andy showed me how to lead. Mel showed me trust. Mike showed me endurance. Jack showed me intelligence. But Joe showed all of us who we had to become. People will remember the championships. I understand that. 4 Super Bowls. The Steel Curtain. All those photographs of us standing together looking tougher than we probably felt. That is what remains in the record books. But when you are the man who lived through it, you remember different things. You remember Andy Russell arriving prepared when nobody was watching. You remember Mel Blount standing behind you and the quiet relief of knowing he would handle his part. You remember Mike Webster getting back into his stance after a long practice, even when both of you were tired and neither of you wanted another collision. You remember Jack Ham seeing something the rest of you had missed. And you remember Joe Greene. You always remember Joe. None of those men needed me to admire them. They were not playing for that. We were trying to win football games. We were trying to do our jobs and avoid disappointing the man standing next to us. Maybe that was why those teams worked. Andy gave me an example of leadership. Mel gave me trust. Mike gave me resistance. Jack gave me a better understanding of the game. Joe gave all of us a standard. I did not stop during those years and put those lessons into words. Who does that when he is young? You assume there will be another practice, another Sunday, another season, then time passes. The noise disappears and you begin to understand what stayed with you. I was never a copy of any of those men. I was too stubborn for that. But some part of each one found its way into how I played. Andy's responsibility, Mel's dependability, Mike's refusal to stay down, Jack's patience, Joe's demand that the work be done properly. People remember the championships. I remember the men who made those championships possible. And if there was ever anything in my game worth admiring, then I should be honest about where some of it came from. It came from the men on this list.